Okay, this is the first of two videos talking about reverb in Reaper, and I'm gonna focus my attention just on the reverbs that come with the program for free, built in, the factory plugins. I've got a little track queued up, and this is just a drum beat that I've used in a prior video, and then a really quick, not too exciting piano part that I just played in. And for the piano part, I'm actually using a different sound. I'm using the Ratio piano, also free from the Orchestral Tools Sign Factory library. So and one of the reasons I've chosen to use that is because it doesn't have built-in reverb like the Spitfire library. And you notice on the vintage drums right now, I have dialed my reverb and my grit down to sort of nothing. So we're just hearing the dry sounds. Spitfire, the Spitfire library actually does have a little bit of ambiance just baked in. The piano a little less so. So this is what I'm working with right now. Okay, a little sloppy there. So now there are a couple of things we can do. We've seen already that, I could go into the drums here to add reverb. And I've got some different options, or I could do toasty. But that almost heightens the effect of the piano here and the drums being kind of in two different places. So another thing I could do is use the DAW, use Reaper to add reverb. And there are a couple of different reverb plugins or effects that come with reverb. The first thing I want to talk about is how we're going to do this. I could put a reverb plugin on each of these tracks, and I could make it the same exact effect, and that way I could try to simulate the effect of them being in a similar place. But imagine if I had 8 or 10 tracks trying to do that. I'd load 8 or 10 instances of the same reverb plugin, and that actually can be very, very taxing on your computer processor, and it's just not an efficient way to work. So most of the time when you're dealing with a plugin like Reverb, which is designed to kind of simulate the effect of being in an ambient space, a specific space, instead of putting reverbs on each track, you're actually going to create a separate track, which is going to be a reverb track, and we're going to send audio to that track. And a way to think about this is almost like, imagine an echo chamber. Like you've got a speaker, excuse me, you got a speaker in a room, and you're sending signal to that room to capture the audio quality of the room, and then kind of filtering it back into your recording. So to create a reverb track, I'm going to create another track. Remember that in Reaper, there's no difference between auxiliary tracks, effects tracks. They're all the same. I'm gonna call this reverb. And the first thing I'm going to do, this is just a little quirk I have, is I am going to is color my track, and I like to make, don't ask me why, but I like to make my reverb tracks yellow. Just my effects tracks in general. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the FX, and I'm going to look up, and I'm going to limit to the company Kakos, which makes Reaper, and I'm going to look up reverb, and let's see what I have. Let's go here. Okay, so we're going to see, I guess I can't do both of those. Well, I'll just show you reverb. These are the two plugins that come with the program. Reverb, and notice it's R-E-A or Reaverb and Reaverbate. The more simple of these two plugins is Reaverbate. This is an algorithmic reverb, and I'm going to save a discussion for what that means. It really just means it's a computer program that's generating this reverb, and we're going to load this up. All right, so we're going to start with that. For this video, that's the one we're going to use. You're going to see some parameters here, and just like most of Reaper, this is not super graphically exciting, but that's okay. Now, the first thing I'm going to do when I know that I'm using my reverb as a reverb track, a designated reverb track, is I am going to pull my dry signal all the way down, right? And I'll pull this wet up to 0. I want the full wet sound. All I want is reverb because I'm going to be mixing the sound of the track itself with the wet reverb sound. So I don't want more dry sound. That's just going to lower the impact of the reverb. And you see I've got a bunch of different different parameters here. Room size is going to determine really the length of the reverb. And I'll go through these actually as we get started. So the way reverb or any effects sends work in Reaper is as follows. I'm going to mute the piano for right now and just work with the drums. Let's mute the piano. Let's hear the drums. And again, you are hearing a little bit of ambient reverb there because it's built into the sound. I'm going to take the route button and I'm going to click and drag. And you see I've got that little plug when I get down to the reverb. I'm going to let go. And now this opens up the send controls for the track. So I'm sending right now audio from vintage 1975 drums to my reverb track. And if I don't do anything, the send level is pretty high. It's way up at 0. And out of the gate, that reverb to my ear sounds pretty bad. So let's look at some of the sends. Now, first off, once I've done that, once that thing goes away, to get it back, I just need to click Route here, and I'll see that here is the receive from vintage 1975 drums, and I can pull this down. But let's leave the send relatively high right now and look at what's happening with the actual reverb effect. So the first place I'm going to start here, I'm going to leave the room size alone for a moment. I'm hearing kind of a very tinny, high-pitched digital artifacts to the reverb. So these last two parameters, low pass and high pass, are equalizations on the reverb. And what they do, it's a little counterintuitive if you're not familiar with these terms. Low pass means it lets all the frequencies below this frequency, 20,000 hertz, which is very high, pass through, right? So the lower this goes, the more I'm cutting the high end. Sometimes people call this a high cut, sometimes low pass. Same thing here, a high pass, we're going to cut out the low frequencies, but we're going to keep everything above this number in the mix. And I'm going to start with my low pass because I think if I pull that down, I can get rid of some of that chintzy, high-pitched reverby sound. It does change the quality. I don't know if I fully solved the problem, but we're getting somewhere. The next thing I could do is pull my high pass, and generally on reverb, let's see, if I go all the way, eventually I'll lose most of the reverb. Might get something I like. I might want a larger room sound, but it's going to be like swamped in reverb if I'm not careful. So let's... Then I can go back into my send and just pull that level down. Try to find sort of a sweet spot. Now, a couple of other parameters that are here. The initial delay is often called pre-delay, and that actually institutes a small delay before we hear the reverb kick in. And this can actually be very effective to clarify the initial sound before we hear reverb. Too much. That's kind of working. You can play around with stereo width. Dampening as well, does exactly what it says. Now let's put the piano in. Let's add the piano, and what I'm going to do with the piano is I'm going to send it to the very same reverb. So I'm going to click from root to reverb, just drag it down, and that's a little too much, but let's just pull down the send level here. I can kind of live with that, and if you want to compare, this is what we had. I can just I can just turn off the reverb, or I could mute the reverb track, actually. Simpler. Right now we're going to hear it without that effect. And now I'll just turn that on, and we'll hear it with. Last thing I'll say is these things aren't like mutually exclusive. So just because I'm sending to this reverb, I might also decide I want to use some of the, oh, actually, I left this reverb on anyway. So let's turn it, I forgot about that. Let's turn this all the way down just so we hear it like that. And we can just hear, right, without reverb. With this reverb, and now if we go in here, we'll make sure we're getting the reverb. Oh, a second. So we can sort of combine things up, but on the piano, I don't have the built-in reverb. I just have. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to leave it right there. That's how to set up an effect send, how to use Reaverbate. And actually, I should let's make this right. Reaverbate. And I'll be back with the discussion of the other reverb very soon. Thank you.